They called it Hollywood's golden age, but behind the dazzling lights and glamorous premieres lurked a secret underworld, one where the biggest stars weren't just acting out drama on screen. What if the legends you adore were also breaking the law in real life? Ready for a ride through scandals the studios never wanted you to hear? Think you know who's on this list? Think again. Stick around because some secrets are juicier than any movie plot you've ever watched. Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was once comedy royalty, the king of slapstick, and the man who could turn any pratfall into box office gold. But in 1921, the laughter stopped. Arbuckle found himself at the center of one of Hollywood's first major scandals, accused of causing the death of aspiring actress Virginia Rapp after a raucous party. The trial was a media circus. Tabloids splashed his name everywhere. Crowds camped outside the courthouse, and moral panic gripped America. Arbuckle faced 3 separate trials for manslaughter. The first 2 ended in hung juries, but the third finally cleared him. Too little, too late. By then the public had already decided, guilty or not, his name was poison. Studios canceled his contracts, theaters boycotted his films, and his reputation was left in ruins. Arbuckle's story became the blueprint for how fast Hollywood could turn on its own. Here's the kicker. Though he was legally acquitted, the whispers never faded. Every time a new scandal hit Tinseltown, the ghost of Fatty Arbuckle's trial lingered in the background, reminding everyone just how thin the line between fame and infamy can be. Some stars get second acts. Arbuckle never really did. Robert Mitchum. You want a classic tough guy? Robert Mitchum was the real deal, tall, brooding, the face of film noir. But Mitchum's off-screen life was just as gritty as any detective flick. In 1948, at the height of his stardom, Mitchum was arrested during a police raid at a Hollywood house party. His crime? Smoking marijuana. In the late 1940s, that was enough to turn a matinee idol into a tabloid punching bag. Mitchum's mugshot flashed across every newspaper, with headlines painting him as a dangerous rebel. The studios panicked. He was sentenced to 60 days at a prison farm, forced to trade tailored suits for striped jumpsuits. Most stars would have crumbled, but Mitchum didn't blink. When reporters swarmed him, he just shrugged and called the whole thing a little vacation. Instead of hiding, he leaned in, returning to the screen and giving some of his greatest performances. Audiences loved him even more. The message was clear. You could lock up Robert Mitchum, but you couldn't kill his cool. He turned a scandal into street cred, proving that sometimes the real outlaws are also the real legends. Judy Garland. She sang her way into America's heart as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, but Judy Garland's off-screen life was no fairy tale. While the world adored her, Hollywood studios were busy handing out little pills behind the scenes. As a teenager, Garland was ordered to take amphetamines to keep up with grueling filming schedules, then knocked out with other pills so she could finally sleep. Here's the criminal part. These weren't doctor's orders. They were illegal. Backroom deals from studio bosses, desperate to control her every move. By her 20s, Garland was tangled in addiction and had more run-ins with the law than most would believe. Paparazzi stalked her as she staggered out of nightclubs, and stories of her substance abuse hit headlines just as hard as her chart-topping records. Garland's legal troubles became the stuff of legend, late-night police calls, hospitalizations, and a court system that barely pretended to help. She spent years trying to shake free from the chains the industry had locked around her. The lesson? Even the brightest rainbow has shadows. Judy's story wasn't just about Hollywood dreams. It was about Hollywood's most dangerous secrets played out in real life. Errol Flynn, swashbuckling, devil-may-care, the face of Robin Hood and every kid's idea of a dashing hero, Errol Flynn was pure movie magic. Off-screen, not so charming. In 1942, Flynn found himself in the middle of a firestorm when he was put on trial for the assault of 2 underage girls. The case gripped the nation, with newspapers devouring every detail. Flynn, who always seemed to be the life of the party, was suddenly the villain. The trial was a circus. Fans camped outside the courthouse. The prosecution painted him as a predator, and Flynn fired back with that infamous Hollywood smirk. After weeks of testimony and mountains of headlines, he was acquitted. But that didn't mean innocent. Hollywood's most dazzling hero had spent time in a courtroom dock, his reputation forever dented. The phrase, "in like Flynn," became slang for skating by trouble. But for a lot of people, the trial was the real story. Flynn went back to making movies, but the shadow of the courtroom never quite left him. Heroes, it turns out, are sometimes just pretending. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wasn't just the king of the crooners. He was also the king of close calls with the law. He wore slick suits and smooth talk, but the FBI kept a file on Sinatra that could fill a library. Why? Let's start with his infamous connections. Sinatra's friendships weren't limited to other musicians and movie stars. They included some of the most feared mob bosses of the 20th century. He rubbed elbows with the likes of Sam Giancana and Lucky Luciano, making headlines every time he was photographed at a club or casino. And then there was the draft dodging controversy, with whispers that Sinatra paid a doctor $40,000 for a fake exemption during World War II. The rumors stuck, and the press had a field day. But it didn't stop there. Sinatra faced assault charges after an altercation with a photographer, and his name surfaced in multiple gambling and racketeering investigations. Still, no jury ever put him behind bars. Some say he sang his way out of trouble. Others credit his high-powered friends. One thing's for sure, Frank wasn't just singing about the city that never sleeps. He was living it, crime and all. In Hollywood, Sinatra proved you could be untouchable on stage and nearly untouchable in court. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp himself, could make a whole crowd laugh without saying a word. But in real life, Chaplin found himself on trial for a far less charming script. In 1944, Chaplin was hit with the Mann Act, a serious federal charge accusing him of transporting Joan Barry, a much younger woman, across state lines for immoral purposes. The trial was a media feeding frenzy. Every newspaper in the country plastered Chaplin's face and called him everything from a menace to a monster. Even though he was acquitted of the criminal charges, Chaplin wasn't out of the woods. He was still forced to pay child support for Barry's baby, despite later DNA evidence proving he wasn't the father. The whole affair shattered his wholesome image and made him an easy target for the political climate of the day. Chaplin's U.S. residency was revoked, and he spent his later years living in exile, never fully escaping the long shadow of the law. Behind the bowler hat and cane was a man who learned just how quickly Hollywood can turn laughter into courtroom silence. Wallace Beery. Wallace Beery's on-screen persona was all gruff charm and heart, but off-camera, he was a different story, one with a distinctly criminal edge. The big scandal? Beery's alleged involvement in the mysterious death of Ted Healy, creator of the Three Stooges. In 1937, after a wild night at the Trocadero nightclub, Healy ended up dead. Witnesses claimed Beery, along with mob-connected companions, delivered a brutal beating. The police report was murky, the coroner's notes questionable, and the Hollywood rumor mill went into overdrive. Beery quickly took an extended vacation overseas while the case cooled down. He was never charged, and when he returned, the studio brass had already polished his image for public consumption. Still, the whispers stuck. Was Wallace Beery just a tough guy on film, or something much darker in real life? In the world of Hollywood cover-ups, Beery's story stands out as a chilling reminder that sometimes the biggest stars have the deepest secrets, and that sometimes justice gets rewritten by a good publicity team. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton's rise in Hollywood was meteoric, her fall absolutely catastrophic. She was the definition of a star on the edge, both on screen and off. By the early 1950s, Payton was starring alongside heavyweights like James Cagney and Gary Cooper, but behind the glamour was a life spinning wildly out of control. Arrests for public drunkenness, forging checks, and even solicitation charges piled up faster than film credits. Her infamous love triangle with actors Tom Neal and Franchot Tone exploded in violence, landing both men in the hospital and her in the tabloid Hall of Fame. By the mid-1950s, Payton's career was in freefall, and the only headlines she was making involved mugshots and police blotters. She spent her last years in and out of jail, struggling to survive in a city that had cheered her rise and then watched her crash. Barbara Payton became Hollywood's cautionary tale, a living, breathing reminder that the climb to the top is tough, but the fall can be lethal. Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly's story is straight out of a gritty crime drama, except this time, the Hollywood star wasn't just acting. In 1927, Kelly was already a matinee idol when he got into a violent fight with fellow actor Ray Raymond. The altercation turned deadly, with Raymond fatally injured. Kelly was charged with manslaughter and sentenced to more than 2 years behind bars at San Quentin. It wasn't some tabloid exaggeration. He was a real convict, wearing real prison stripes. Hollywood tried to erase his memory, but Kelly was nothing if not persistent. After serving his time, he clawed his way back into the industry, landing roles in movies and on Broadway. He even won a Tony Award, making him one of the few stars to turn a prison sentence into an odd kind of second act. Kelly's comeback was legendary, but no matter how many awards he won, that prison record followed him everywhere. In a town built on reinvention, Kelly proved you could outrun almost anything, except your own rap sheet. Mae West. Mae West was always a lightning rod for controversy, but what most people don't realize is that she was a convicted criminal long before she ever sashayed through Hollywood's golden doors. In 1927, West wrote and starred in a play simply titled Sex, and the reaction was pure panic. Police stormed the theater, dragged West off stage, and slapped her with a jail sentence for corrupting the morals of youth. 10 Days in the Slammer didn't break her spirit, it supercharged her career. West charmed the warden, held press conferences from her cell, and walked out a bigger star than ever. She never apologized, never backed down, and used her mugshot as the ultimate Hollywood calling card. Her criminal record became her secret weapon, proving that sometimes the fastest way to fame is straight through the courthouse. For Mae West, breaking the law wasn't the end, it was just the opening act. Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant may not be from the same era as the silent legends, but his real-life misadventures landed him in a league of his own. In the mid-1990s, Grant was the king of romantic comedies, charming audiences with his bumbling, lovable act. But in 1995, he was arrested on Hollywood's Sunset Strip, caught in a compromising situation during a police sting operation. The fallout was instant and global. Grant's mugshot was everywhere, and his apology tour became a late-night comedy staple. While most stars might have vanished after that kind of scandal, Grant flipped the script. He poked fun at himself, faced the cameras, and somehow turned humiliation into a fresh career chapter. But make no mistake, when it comes to classic criminal blunders in Tinseltown, Hugh Grant's name is still a punchline that nobody saw coming. Sometimes, it turns out, the most unexpected twists come from the stars who seemed least likely to fall. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead didn't just break rules, she turned rule-breaking into an art form. Known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, Bankhead's off-screen escapades often landed her on the wrong side of the law. She was famously detained for wild parties, disruptive antics, and more than one brush with disorderly conduct. Tallulah wasn't content with playing by Hollywood's rules. She created her own. The press couldn't get enough. Each arrest only added to her legend. She openly challenged social norms, drank and smoked with abandon, and spoke her mind no matter who was listening. Her criminal run-ins didn't damage her brand. They turned her into an icon of rebellion. In an industry desperate for good publicity, Bankhead showed that being bad could be the best career move of all. She didn't just act in dramas, she lived them, one tabloid headline at a time.